Okay, sound test, 1, 2, this is Danny. I'm talking at normal volume. Go ahead, Emma.
Can you hear me, Danny? I'm at normal volume.
Okay, and let's talk. Emma, how are you doing? Let's just do a back and forth so they can test the audio.
Okay, I'm doing well. How are you going, Danny?
Okay, you guys, please let us know how the audio levels are because we will most likely not be able to tweak very much when we go live. Please let us know in the chat. Thank you very much. Emma Sgourakis, thank you so much for joining me. I think we have successfully ended the Emma Sgourakis live stream curse, and so I appreciate it. Thank you so much. How are you?
Thanks for having me. Thanks for persisting.
Yeah, no problem. I think I still have PTSD from the last live stream we did, so if people don't remember, well, I was using like a strange program, and there was some audio echoing, and I couldn't figure it out, and it was like probably the most like devastating thing to like experience on a live stream, and being totally out of control of the echo. And Georgie was on too, and I was just like, oh my god, this is so like such a terrible situation. And I just didn't feel like we got to like properly I mean, not that people can't find your content online, but I just thought it was a bad introduction, and so we wanted to do this, but things kept interrupting the scheduling. So again, thank you very much.
No, thanks for persisting. I always love chatting with you anyway, so now we can just chat with everyone else listening.
Exactly. So thank you guys so much for joining us, spending your Friday evening with us, guys. Thank you so much. So I mean, we'll just kind of start from square one. Like, I consider you like a kind of an OG Ray Peat person, and so I think like Rob Turner, obviously like Doty, and I'm probably forgetting some people, but yourself, but it's just like there was like a small group in maybe like 2011, 2012 that was like talking about Ray.
Yeah.
And so, and that group was not big, and I feel like a lot of it flourished on Facebook. And so I was part of various Facebook groups, and because nobody really wanted to talk about his stuff, it wasn't very popular. So I've told my story many times, but how did you get into Ray's work?
Yeah, I've been practicing nutrition for a good probably 8-9 years before I thankfully came across his work. But yeah, been down every avenue, tried many things like you had to, Danny, and got to a point where I was kind of at my wit's end thinking, well, what I've tried does not work. Every instance I'd hit a wall, or I think I was at the point of almost going vegan, cleansing, raw juicing, been back and forth to New York, working with experts over there, and physically I was not thriving. And I just remember thinking, well, if vegetables are the epitome of everything, and I'm noticing in myself symptoms that things aren't being, really supported. I literally Googled the question, who defines health food, or something about vegetables. And I Googled this question, and Ray's article came up, the one about vegetables, who defines food. And if you haven't read that one, I recommend everyone go back to his website, read that. It's at the very bottom, last 3, I think. And for me, it was just light bulb moment, fireworks going off. I sat there and I started reading his articles, didn't sleep, just ate it all up. But for the first time ever, things made sense. Like, compared to everything I'd learned at uni, everything I'd learned in practice. There was always things that challenged me, and you'd go, oh, well, do that because that's what they tell you to do. But just reading that article alone, it was more clarity in that than anything. And then from there on, it just kept going. But reflecting back on the things I then, I did learn in college and how, contradictory they were to how things really work, it was just so exciting. So then from there on, I just wanted to eat it all up and know it all and start applying it with my clients immediately. But I just wanted to learn everything in a hurry. So I started digging down, who can I work with? Who can I learn from? Who's already, deciphered a lot of this? So I found Rob Turner and had a few great conversations with him. He's a fabulous bloke and really very knowledgeable in all of this. But it was quite funny. I remember saying to him, okay, well, as a practitioner, can I do some training with you? And I want to learn everything there is about, metabolism, particularly female hormones and supporting women who can't get pregnant and all those topics. And he straight out, he's very blunt and he doesn't beat around the bush. He pretty much said, if you want to really understand female hormones, he goes, who am I to teach you about female hormones? I'm not a female. You need to work with a female.
Yeah.
So he introduced me to Dodie Anderson. So from there on, she's become like an auntie to me. She's gorgeous, gorgeous human, very knowledgeable. She's one of the few people who've worked directly one-on-one with Ray over a long period of time. Even to this day, she is on the phone to him every week, and we'd have our chats, and then she'd give me little tidbits of things Ray had said to her directly that week, or what he was eating for breakfast or something, and it was always really exciting. So work with her and help them, work on their popping the food bubble course and adding to that. But yeah, just continuously learning ever since. So that was 2011. And then I think you and I connected with 2013.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was I think through the On the Back of the Tiger campaign, right? Or
I think maybe even before that.
Maybe before that. Okay, yeah, I might be a little confused.
Yeah, I kept knowing you, and we had a bit of a Skype before then, I think. Yeah, and then On the Back of the Tiger, probably.
Well, what was the thing about Ray's vegetable article that you dug your claws into? Because that's such an organic way of figuring out about Ray. But was there something in that you that was new that you had never thought about, or what?
Yeah, well, I think it just reminded me that, because you go to learn this stuff, or you become maybe indoctrinated of what is healthy, and you just get told, go out there and encourage people to eat a vegetable-centric diet, eat more salmon, eat more nuts, cut back on red meat, cut back on dairy, don't eat saturated fats, all those things. And you go, oh, okay. And it fits with the narrative. So I guess once you start practicing, people feel confident in knowing that, oh, that fits with what I'm told is healthy, so I feel good about you as a practitioner. But rarely would you ever see anyone coming back saying, gee, that really made a difference to my health. So you rarely get ongoing work with clients because they'd like your advice. They'd go and maybe implement it for a little while, but then you'd never really see anything from them. But after getting, I suppose, that wake-up call and having to revisit physiology, and it was a reminder that just to not forget to be a critical thinker and not to just take it for granted that I'm told this is what's healthy, therefore I'll just pass on that information, but to question it and go, well, on what level is it healthy? And hang on, when you look at vegetables, for example, they are loaded with anti-nutrients and naturally occurring plant toxins. They're made up of, the cell structure is cellulose. We do not create cellulase that can break down cellulose. Even if you could get the nutrients out of a lot of them, then not necessarily in a bioavailable form. They still need conversion. And in that article, it outlined a lot of those things, or didn't outline it, because Ray never does say this is how things are. He just suggests, well, think about this then, or what about that? And you go, oh, actually, yeah. How is it that vegetables are so perfect? They're not perfect. Well, nothing is really, but maybe there's foods that are, going to serve us better, provide nutrients that are directly bioavailable to us, and they don't have the enzyme inhibitors, they don't, resist digestion. So all of that was a big reminder to go, oh, all those things I'd questioned before, I should have questioned more so. And in that moment too, I reflected back on being in college and you go into your, biology class. And I remember the teacher, he'd talk about lipids, for example, and how, look at these saturated fatty acids compared to the polyunsaturated ones. And these are all bound by hydrogen and they're quite stable and they're resistant to heat, light, and oxygen. And then you've got the polyunsaturated ones. Oh, they're more delicate. You've got to be cautious of these ones. And you go, okay, well, they're a bit vulnerable and these are quite solid. And then you'd walk into the nutrition lecture next door and the large, dare I say it, kind of frumpy lecturer who'd be sipping on her celery juice and carrot juice and telling us, just remind everyone to take their fish oil supplements and eat their salmon and have their salads, the same thing every time. And even at the time, she'd be dissing the saturated fats, saying how bad they were. But next door, the science guy was saying, these are really stable. And at the time, it didn't really sit well with me, but seeing Ray put it so beautifully, you'd go, oh my God, it was all there.
Well, so you just had a deep down feeling that something was fundamentally wrong and your clients weren't getting results. And so the discovery was based on just wanting to understand better and feeling that something was inherently wrong with the approach that you were using. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think I had it in me from day one that if I was going to be out there recommending someone to eat a certain way, if I couldn't experience that being the best way to eat myself personally, who am I to recommend that to you? So that's why I've explored, and you've done the same thing. I've explored so many different ways of eating, thinking, well, I think I felt my worst in my early 20s when I was really digging into macrobiotics, eating all those grains and legumes and very little meat and tofu. Oh my God, I felt horrendous. But at the time it was touted as being so nutritious and beneficial and alkalizing and all of that. So I figured, okay, well, I will explore it myself. I'll, to the nth degree. And if I don't feel fantastic for it, it's not going to be what I'm going to recommend. And I would do that with everything. But it wasn't until I, read Ray's work, it sat well with me. I could, I suppose, mentally digest it too. And then started putting into practice those things on myself, feeling immediate relief. And then from there on, when I start working with clients and start to apply the things I learned from him, I would get amazing responses from people. I've had PMS for 20 years and all of a sudden they're calling me saying, oh my God, it's just gone, or continuous bloating from the foods they were eating. And they were shoving all this food in there that's just not digestible, full stop. So I think, that word being digestible, that was also so foreign in my learning in nutrition. We're just told to, encourage them to eat the food that is green, organic, clean, whatever that means, balanced, it looks good on the plate, but is it actually digestible? And that's what a big thing that's being missed, I think. And Ray was another thing he really reminded me of was the digestibility of the food, full stop.
Well, it reminds me of that quote by Ray, and it's like, where food or eating is political and economical, and the government tells people to eat beans and rice for a reason. And apparently, I mean, I think there is something to be said for having perspective and age, like kind of seeing trends, but and I think Denise Minger wrote about this too in her food pyramid book, but the idea that grains and these undigestible foods are the most popular is something that was some kind of transitional point, and that wasn't always thought of. It was common knowledge that a more elite rich people ate animal foods, and then the poor peons ate these undigestible foods that you had to cook forever. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Totally. There was that whole shift, I guess. Oh, sorry. Go.
No, go for it.
And I think it might have been mentioned in that article too, but that shift from when did we decide that the famine food of the past is suddenly now the be all and end all health food?
Yeah.
And that was hang on a second.
Yeah. So what was the first thing that you incorporate? So you read this article and you stimulated your imagination. Was there something for yourself that you changed and you're like, oh, this is the real deal, or what?
First thing I started playing with my own eating. Yeah, I stopped eating an avocado a day. I stopped eating raw salads, totally. That made a massive difference. They'd be the biggies. Stop drinking carrot juice. But yeah, starting to appreciate the animal proteins again and not trying to restrict them. But yeah, actually probably beyond all those things is, realizing that those cravings I was having for sugars were my body's natural instincts that were correct. And I went with that. Things that seemed small but made massive difference within 24 hours. Incredible.
And did you, at what point were you start incorporating body temperature and pulse? Because that's something I do appreciate about kind of the bioenergetic approach that Ray and others are talking about, like kind of this inclusion of a metric besides just like subjective kind of evaluation of symptoms, because like just it's not, I don't and I know this is complicated, but like eating foods can be measured on how it's affecting your metabolic rate, like a real-time indicator of what your hormones are doing. So did you implement that at any point? And then
absolutely. I checked my temperatures pretty quickly after starting to understand all that, and was quite shocked at how low they were. But yeah, then you can just reflect back on how did I feel last winter and why am I always the freezing cold one. Absolutely. And I loved, and I think it was a realization too of just the basics of it. If you brought it down to the most extreme analogy, you think about when you're 8 years old and you're carefree and it's middle of winter and your mum's trying to put a jumper on you, but there's this heat pouring out of them and they're fine. They don't, whinge about being cold all the time. You feel their pulse and it's robust and they sleep at night and things are pretty cool. They don't have stress. But then you get the 90-year-old woman who in the middle of summer has got the woolen jumper on, can't even find her pulse, and there's that frailness about her. That I think too was like, we've got to emulate more of that youthfulness. And when you notice yourself being so cold and frail and deficient in energy like that, that's a big wake up call. And I love that with understanding all this, yes, acknowledge symptoms. Absolutely, symptoms never lie. But then even without necessarily, and there's definitely validity to getting blood tests on certain levels, but even a lot of those can be inaccurate. I love that you could just pick up a thermometer, you could check in on your pulse at any moment. There's things Dodie and I have done together, like little checklists of things that, at any given moment you could walk past the fridge and just glance over this list of things, but just to check in where you are at metabolically. Even just looking at your nail beds, are they a bit pinkish and not bluish? Taking your fingers and placing them on your chest and seeing if there's that noticeable difference from your extremities to your core. The things that don't require fancy testing methods, your Achilles reflex test, things like that. I love that you have that control that you can, and to empower people with those sort of tools.
Yeah, you might be able to resonate with this, but the amount of, and again, I'm guilty of this too, but saying like, oh yeah, I got the test. Don't worry, they're normal. I hear that like all the time. So again, the tests I think are interesting, and they do provide some good information, but they're all subject to interpretation. And as we've talked about on this live stream, like medicine is kind of an art. And so it's like, how good of an artist is your doctor? And is he putting things within the bioenergetic context? Probably not. So you're totally right. I think the temperature and pulse fly under the radar a lot of the time. What was what was your general impression of Ray, given that you've had various experiences of diet and things? Because when I first got into him, I kind of treated him like this guru type, and was real sanctimonious about everything he would say. But then I think over the course of like many years, realized he was just kind of like a really humble guy, but he didn't want to be treated like somebody. At least my interpretation is that he doesn't want this extreme reverence and people to kind of like bow to his wisdom. But that took me a long time to figure out.
Definitely. And you can see there was no incentive behind what he did, because you could email him and answer your question. You could buy a book, it didn't cost much. You could get his, read all his articles, they were there and they were free and available. But I think the big thing that made a big difference to me was that he wasn't a nutritionist. And I really respected that, because I think anyone else I'd learned from up until that point, you're learning from them and they're trained as a nutritionist, and it's about the food. And it's almost the food comes first in the conversation rather than the body, the cells, the pathways, that information, the physiology. And I love that he was just a very, very, very brilliant, biologist and artist and everything else he does. But he'd, come to a level of understanding about the human body and about hormones and metabolism. And with knowing that, he could then find the clues as to what food would fit and support, that sort of energetic production, I suppose. So sort of working backwards. Whereas everything I'd learned in the world of nutrition was you start with a food. Yeah. Okay, it's a given. Everyone knows veggies are good for you. You probably shouldn't eat too much red meat and cut back on dairy. And no one then questions who decided all these rules. And then we just sit there and how can we shove that food into as many bodies as possible? But more than that, we've got to encourage them to buy all of these supplements. And you come out of these courses, in Australia, there's certain companies that are very much affiliated with the courses, and you're recommending more nutritional supplements than you are actual food. And the food advice is one size fits all, very much so. So with Ray, it was flipping it all inside out and going, hang on, understand the body first at that level, and then all the clues are right there as to what foods could probably facilitate the body functioning better.
Yeah, Ray has a quote, and it's like, you can't figure out, I'm going to butcher this, but it's like, you can't figure out where you're going if you don't know where you are. And so you're from what I understand, you're saying like, you measure your pulse and temperature and you gauge your symptoms, and then you start incorporating foods and things to hopefully, or supplements or whatever, to push that in the right direction. But it's not...
Eat in a way that supports the metabolic rate, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it's not a drink 2 quarts of milk and cross your fingers that it does something. It's like an active participatory approach where you're and everything's kind of this moving target, which doesn't make necessarily things the easiest, but it's just like reality of living in kind of the environment that we do. Yeah.
And to remind everyone to be their own scientist in this, their own experimenter.
Yeah.
And, if anyone's ever emailed a question to Ray before, just said, is this good? Or what is the answer to that? He won't just give you a blatant answer because there probably isn't one. I remember one of the most interesting kind of question little sequences I had with Ray once was on potatoes. Mm-hmm. There was something I was asking about the keto acids and the potassium and how they work and how they mop up urea and how they create new proteins. And I was quite fascinated by that and thought, wow, potatoes seem pretty amazing on that level, don't they? And so I emailed him about that and he goes, yeah, great, this is how it works. And then I emailed him back about how it helps on the level of even with blood sugar handling and the potassium levels as well. And he was very much, yes, very beneficial. And I could have left the conversation there. And then I would have just gone all out and said, you know what, everyone needs to eat a lot of potatoes. They're so good. But I kept quizzing him and I just asked one more question. And I just said, oh, so you must admit then that potatoes are pretty much, beneficial for most people then, would you say so? And he went, well, no, I haven't touched them in 20 years. And I made me go, oh, you just always got to question that a little bit further and always dig that little bit deeper and realize that, there is no one food that is always going to be great for everyone. There could be a possible downside to it. But yeah, the way he provides information, he will sort of answer exactly what you've asked him, but not necessarily disclose.
Yeah, I always do that. There's an Abraham Maslow quote, and it's like, if somebody's in pain, to tell them to stop hurting is actually like a sign of disrespect to them. And I kind of think, again, I'm just kind of guessing here, but I think when you ask him something and he replies, but he just like answers your question, again, I don't know this for a fact, but I think it's like maybe a sign of like disrespect if he were to be like, yeah, potatoes are okay, but they're like terrible for most people with digestive problems or whatever. Like because like I had asked him about mechanisms of hair loss or whatever. And I didn't understand like large chunks of it, but understood like another piece maybe 6 months or a year later. But I was like, why didn't Ray ever? We were like kind of talking about this, but he never mentioned it. And so I think that's just kind of respecting the person and the learning process. Like, yeah, if this person is going in one direction, they'll probably eventually figure it out. And you don't always have to be the one to like encapsulate the whole thing and give that, like, regurgitate it to them in like one single sentence. So yeah,
and look, and I've seen a lot of people thrive on potatoes, that do really well, but that's it. And it's, context is everything. It's in what body are you talking about giving potatoes to? Are they riddled with bacterial overgrowth? Do they have stomach acid? Are they constipated? Are they hypermetabolic? Different scenario for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so thank you guys so much. Sincerely appreciate it. We'll answer super chats at the end. Ellie, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you guys for hanging out in the chat. Thank you, Emma, for being here. Let me go to the browser view here. And let me just post the show notes. Oh no, can't see the URL. Oh no. One second here, people. Oh, here we go. This is the show notes if you guys want to follow along. Is that? Oh, it's too long. Okay, I'll post these after, unfortunately. Okay, you can see this screen, Emma?
Yep.
Okay, so we should probably hit some more of these topics. So you do have a special experience of being pregnant while incorporating a lot of these things, and also just having children, something I have never done. And so how, what is your general take on that? And did Ray's or the bioenergetic perspective help you in any way with that? Or do you think there was anything that was made easier, made harder, or anything like that?
Well, I'm really grateful I found his work before I even became a mother or became pregnant, definitely. But I think maybe even beyond what Ray's advice was, but just to remind myself to go with your instinct as you would on all things. And I think the pregnancy process these days has become so, you're almost treated like you're a sick person, and you're constantly tested and analysed, and you're not allowed to get excited till you're 12 weeks because high chance you're a miscarriage, particularly if you're an older mother like I was told I was. Very bizarre. And if I didn't have the information behind me that I did, it would have been almost quite a stressful process to go through. So I sort of learned early on to just go by feel. I didn't even read baby books. I just kind of took things as it came, but to observe my cravings throughout it was really interesting. And I didn't see them as, a sign of a weakness or a bad thing. I went with them, and baby number 1 was all about gelati and milkshakes and cheesecakes, and baby number 2 was all salt and protein. It was very interesting. I think just allowing myself to go through it, and thank goodness I had, really good pregnancies. But I was already dabbling with a bit of progesterone before pregnancy. Then on Ray's advice, I'd say, sorry.
No, sorry, good, keep going.
On Ray's advice, I was like, can I keep using this? And he would kind of wink, nudge, sure. And talked about how progesterone just continues to increase throughout pregnancy, and it can take a bit more. But he did say, and look, I think I had done a lot of work to recover, my progesterone levels before even becoming pregnant, which makes a big difference. But he did say, just be warned, if you have healthy progesterone levels throughout pregnancy, you could have a very large-brained, big-headed child, precocious and headstrong and the whole bit. And he said all this even before I was probably only 4 months pregnant at the time. I remember thinking, oh, yeah. And both pregnancies, I remember the minute they're pulling my child out of me, the first thing the midwife said, both with Oliver and Oscar, was, whoa, big head. Even before I got a glance at my child, I had this image in my mind of this large alien-headed child. And what? And I saw them, and they were very beautiful. But their head circumferences were both a good 6 centimetres above average.
Wow.
And I emailed Ray back at the time, went, you're right, they're wearing big heads. And he goes, well, that's a good sign. But also very smart and headstrong, and that's another challenge. But yeah, very interesting to reflect on what I went through pregnancy and how different it might have been if I'd gone with the general recommendations on what women should eat when they're pregnant. Really quite troubling to still see some of the recommendations. And it's all about restriction, and you shouldn't touch this and you shouldn't do this, and you're on edge about everything and missing out on so many nutrients.
What is it called? I think cephalization, when the head or the head is bigger than the body or something like that. Ray writes about it in his Generative Energy 1994 book. And then he also says somewhere that the infant is our evolutionary future. And so ideally, if like we were in a good environment, the head should be getting bigger and bigger over time. That's so crazy. So shoot, I had another question I wanted to ask you. So okay, I think I do get questions about progesterone use during pregnancy. What is that about? What was your general experience, and then what communication like with Ray? Because I literally know nothing about that. Or like, I'm assuming you can't, taking enough to anesthetize you is kind of the too much point. But it's just kind of like, I don't know. Give me your experience.
Well, I think it depends. I think if you're having a pretty healthy pregnancy, or like a supremely healthy pregnancy, you're going to be, through the placenta, making more and more progesterone throughout pregnancy anyway. And anyone who's had a fantastic pregnancy, they're the ones you see that they're always, described as glowing, and they're in love with their belly and in love with the world, and everything's beautiful, and it's almost this euphoric state. And I would say they're the ones who are just pumping out the progesterone. Yeah. Whereas the women who really struggle and they're continually, morning sick, and it's quite an effort to get through the 9 months. I think they're the ones that are really struggling to make enough, or maybe went into the pregnancy already being massively estrogen dominant. And then probably going by guidelines where they're restricting their sugars, not eating enough food in general. So I must say I wasn't very diligent with my progesterone usage, but I would say if I was feeling not quite there, I'd take a drop, or two here or there. So it was very sporadic more than anything. But when I got to, with both pregnancies, 42 weeks and nothing was budging, I remember going, I think I should leave this alone now. I've got to allow labor to kick in, and apparently I had so much fluid left that I could have gone on for another month or two, 46, 48 weeks. So, I needed help getting them out. But, and at that stage, and I'm a small framed girl, and even, to get their large heads out was going to be more and more challenging.
Well, I remember what I was going to say. You have like Gerber children. They're like really, really cute. So you did something right during your pregnancy.
I think they're cute. Most of the time.
Speaking of, people should go follow Emma on her Instagram, which we are going to talk about more.
I will add on the pregnancy thing, just if you want to mention that. Another thing was so interesting as I was going through it. I think I see anything I do or take on is my own experiment. So I was obviously getting pregnant to have a child, but I wanted to learn about the process and be a better practitioner for mothers out there. And I had a good couple of weeks, probably between 8 weeks, 10 and 12, where all of a sudden I had food aversion, and there was nothing I wanted to eat. The thought of anything and I was very lucky. I didn't throw up once, but I just didn't want to eat anything. And then there's my nutritionist mind thinking, well, I need nutrition now more than ever. It's so important that I eat, but I just don't want to eat anything. And I remember, hello, I've got a visitor.
Live streaming, people. How are you guys in the chat?
Children are all at home because they're not allowed to go anywhere. And I remember emailing Ray at the time saying, I know, the only information he sent me off to was probably Tom Brewer's books, if you haven't read those ones already, which were helpful to a point, but at the same time, beyond having the baby, there's no information out there, which is why I put that particular article together about feeding baby, feeding myself, because there was just a lack of information on that. And Ray hadn't even really explored it. And I got out of him as much as I could, but I had to piece a lot of it together myself. But when I just didn't want to eat food, but I just knew I needed to get good stuff in. I sort of asked Ray, what could I do to get past this point? I want to get all the good stuff in. And he said, oh, we should probably have a couple more carrot salads. And at the time I thought, I could not even think of a carrot salad, let alone the thought of getting that down. I would have done. And then it hit me and I thought, as brilliant as Ray is, he's still not a female.
Yeah.
And he can't reflect on, well, when I was pregnant, this worked for me. And he couldn't. So I knew that I was kind of on my own, and I just had to start filling in, the gaps and piecing things together, because on the topic of pregnancy and the topic of nursing and feeding children, all of that, there's a real lack of really good grounded information. Yeah.
How do I went through that article and I took a screenshot of it. So, this is, people don't care, but I can't access your website right now because I don't have the VPN turned on because it would reduce our connection speed. Okay, but how do people access? It's the nutrition coach, and then it's like feeding baby and me is the article. Is that right?
Yeah. If you go to nutritioncoach.com.au, go to my blog. It's one of the first 2 pages. Okay, feeding baby and me.
I'll remember to put it in the show notes. And then real quick, what has your experience raising children in general with this approach? Because if one of your kids is having a tantrum or something, do you do something specific? Do you think that is a sign of low blood sugar or something? I'm always curious if there's kind of that psychology or physiological approach to raising kids.
Yeah, well, the general consensus is that sugar causes the tantrums, but I see quite the opposite way.
Yeah.
I know when my kids' blood sugar is dropping, or we've been out, we haven't had access to food, I wasn't prepared, and I see them dropping into this kind of hypoglycemic crisis, and I know what's about to happen. So, as long as I have a bag of gummy bears or something around, everyone's happy. But it's so interesting. I don't know if I told you this story before, but for me, it summed it up when my daughter was doing 3-year-old kinder for a little while, which we didn't last long. The days were too long. But she'd be there. She didn't enjoy it. She was so anxious she wouldn't touch her food. So she'd gone maybe 7 hours, no food. Mm-hmm. And I knew that if I didn't get something into her in a hurry, the rest of the evening was going to be, a nightmare. And I'd meet her at the gate and I'd be ready with some orange juice, some chocolate milk I made, handful of gummy bears, piece of fruit, whatever I could grab together, but quite a lot of food. And from the walk around the corner to the car, she would be inhaling it all. And as long as I did that, she'd get in the car, she'd tell me about her day, evening was lovely, slept well, it was all good. But if I'd forgotten that, quite the opposite. And one day I'm walking her back to the car and I'm just kind of, she's furiously getting it all down, and I see a little boy walking out with his mum, and he looked like she did when he walks out, and he's all kind of flailing and looking like a bit, pale. And he looks up at his mum with his big cute eyes and says, "Mum, do you think when we get home we could have some juice?" Like he was asking for some really naughty treat. And she sort of looked down at him kind of condescendingly and kind of said, "Oh, honey, we don't. We only drink water at home," and just kind of pissed him off like that. And I thought, the poor child, he's asking for fruit juice. That's not a bad thing. His instincts are spot on. His blood sugar would have been crashing. And I just wanted to sneakily slip him some sleep or something. Don't tell your mother. But it's just, and I think, well, it's happened, I know, in the States, but in Australia, there's been a big trend the last few years to quit sugar, and sugar is the enemy of everything. Yeah. But I think, obviously the mothers have taken on these diet ideas, and they're inflicting their own diet choices on their poor little children, and encouraging their children not to go by feel and to go by their instincts and listen to their cravings, which I think is a real worry. Obviously don't, feed their sugar cravings with cookies and donuts and whatnot, but why not have some fruit juice? Why not have some fresh fruits, some homemade brownies, some marshmallows? I mean, there's so many good ways of getting it in. And our grandmothers would have done that for us, and they knew how it worked.
I mean, I know a few parents that just yell at their kids when they're acting like they have low blood sugar. So, what a revelation to not be treated that way. I can't imagine how my life or another person's life would be different if the the treatment was more in line with physiology, like basic things that a person should know. So I mean, that's just crazy. Okay, so we should probably move on. Let's. This is something I stole from your Saturday Instagram, which we will talk about. But this is a quote from Ray, and it says, "Nutrition is one of the most important environmental influences on the nature of the organism. Of course, it's not the only thing, you know." And that's what. If you can see this on your screen, I put this together, and like take it with a grain of salt. And I'm interested to bounce this off you and see what you think. So I said the Ray Peat diet. And again, I don't even like using that term. It's just more of like a useful thing. And I only put that in there because I think more people will watch this if I use that term. I think I like to call it Ray Peat inspired nutrition. And I said, or the best nutrition locally available to help increase the metabolic rate as represented by the pulse and temperature. And then some things I could think of where the calcium to phosphorus ratio, which can be calculated in a program like chronometer.com, the saturated fat to unsaturated fat. So ideally you'd want more saturated fat than unsaturated. Sugars over starches, which obviously extremely controversial, and we can talk about it more. Adequate protein, which is something that seems to fly under the radar a lot of the time, and you've also, we'll talk about your Instagram post on that, an article, or just Instagram post rather. And then regular use of supplemental foods like liver and oysters and eggs, and maybe coffee as a source of magnesium, and maybe extra salt could be considered also a supplement. Maybe a daily antiseptic fiber, such as the carrot salad, or maybe even better, the white button mushrooms, which again, we'll talk about your Instagram post. And then the thing that I just added, I forgot about last night, was red light exposure. So if you want to think about light exposure as part of the lifestyle and nutritional approach, I think that would be intelligent as well. And then under this, which I should have spent more time to wrap this around these recommendations, but I put age, average pulse rate and temperature, quality of current and past environments. And so again, like we talked about earlier, I don't think it's like, oh, eat these things and cross your fingers that it works. It's a participatory process of thinking about your life and a person's relationship with stress, and getting data, figuring out where you are, starting with your temperature and pulse and subjective and objective symptoms you have, like the Achilles reflex tendon test, and then kind of moving on from there depending on how deranged the system is. For example, I couldn't even drink milk when I kind of started getting into Ray's ideas, so that wasn't even a thing that I could do. And I wanted to do it, and which motivated me to try a bunch of different things, but at that time, eggshell calcium was really the only thing I could do. So do you have any critique of this graphic I made in 10 minutes?
No, I think it's a really good summary. I think I would even add with the light exposure, just sort of light in general too, not even just red light, but I think people literally forget to just go outside a bit more. And that's one thing our ancestors would have had over us, is just living outdoors a bit more. Whatever you could do outdoors instead of indoors, just light to decrease the cortisol first thing in the morning, more of that.
You're right. I shouldn't have limited it to that, but man,
I'm not trying to find fault.
No, I know. Well, in Mexico, there were people always will write me when I lived in Mexico and say, like, I hope you're enjoying sunny Mexico, but a lot of times it was pretty cloudy there. But there were like a few months it would be super hot, and I'd lay out, and those were always like the best months out of the entire year for me. And so it can get kind of cold in Mexico occasionally, especially how the houses are built. And so that was one of the nice things about coming to Thailand, and at least in Bangkok, you could lay out on like the top of those megapolis buildings and get sun every day. So that was very nice. But we can move on to your Instagram, but I am generally interested in how you approach, this might be, you can give me the elevator pitch, but when you do have like a new client, is there some kind of systematic, not like protocol, but like kind of systematic approach you go through to assess the situation and then to go on from there, or what do you think are some of the most essential basic things that you kind of intro somebody to when you're first conversing?
Yeah, definitely. Most clients I work with, they do a good 3 months with me. So every 2 weeks we do another couple of hours, and they're continuously emailing me questions throughout, and I'm giving them a lot of reading. Sort of course handouts, I suppose, as they go. So we kind of go through the layers over time. But if I get the occasional client who just wants to do a one-off quick 2-hour session, I sort of feel more anxious about how can I get them as much information as possible in one conversation, but, you know, it's taken us years to evolve our own learning. So one conversation, you can only get so far, but I start by doing a very lengthy sort of health questionnaire before we even meet. So I have a bit of a snapshot of the things that are potentially going on. And I think to be guided by their questions too.
Are they doing popping the food bubble at the same time they're talking to you? So they're kind of doing an educational course and then that's so smart.
Well, it's the basis of that. Gosh, it changed my world when I used to work with a client and then from scratch write out their whole protocol, some ideas, you know, 10 pages of stuff, and then rewrite that for each client. And then since working with Rob and Dodie and having sort of a course basis to go by and handouts to give them, and then I've built on that with my own work as well. It's so much more doable because I can say, oh, you need that topic, you need to dig into that, here's that one, and all of them are linked with lots of further reading they can do and research links and things like that. So that, yeah, it's made a huge difference. Yeah. But yeah, I think we sort of start by conversations around questioning, rethinking, I suppose, the general narrative around health to start with, and just bring the questions to light and have them start to see why what they've been doing up until now hasn't been working for them, obviously, or they wouldn't have come to try and find a nutritionist. And then going, I suppose, starting with macronutrients and then looking into other nutrients and the importance of proteins and why complete animal proteins are important, you know, and then, you know, the important topics like, you know, calcium and dairy products and coffee. But I always steer it around each client individually. So his questions might be about his high blood pressure and his weight gain, and her questions are about how am I trying to get pregnant. And ultimately there are certain things they can all do that are going to support them all similarly. But yeah, I'm driven by what their intentions are and what their interests are, because, you know, as you know, you could work with a client ongoing for a year and there's still more to go through.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Okay, so one of the things that is frequently said is like we engage mostly on theory on this live stream, on this YouTube channel. And so something I love about you is that you are really passionate about nutrition, and I feel similarly. So I was thinking that we could go through your Instagram and then you could give us a background of kind of the why you posted it and maybe how, for some of these, like how you actually made it. And so the first thing I have on here is the protein. And so I thought this was just such a great idea of like what 90 grams of protein actually looks like. And so this was just genius. Do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Oh, thanks. This came from, for a long time, there were certain clients I'd worked with for 3 months, even 6 months, some that just wanted to keep coming back. And I almost felt like they were starting to use me as a crutch rather than take the information, you know, explore for yourselves, and you can start to figure it out. But one thing, when I didn't see them progressing like they should be at that point, I'd start to think, are you really getting enough protein in? Because it's fundamental. I mean, you're just not going to have the efficient liver function, you know, among other things. But I would question them, and I knew that they'd come from a history of restrictive dieting. So I was just checking in and saying, you're getting a good 90 grams of protein in. They'd log and measure and do things like that. But even still, I wasn't sure, because sometimes you can make estimates on measurements and perhaps it's a good 10, 20 grams lower than it might have been. And I get this ongoing response, yeah, getting heaps of protein, yeah, way more than I used to. And I'm a very visual learner. I have a design background in my past life, and I learn visually, and I like to present information that way a lot too. And I just thought to myself, I wonder what would happen if I posted an image like this and showed what a whole day's worth of protein being the bare minimum amount for most people. I mean, that would be for a fairly small sedentary female, I'd say, without additional stressors, who's not doing, I don't know, a lot of resistance exercise. This would be the bare minimum. So I posted this picture, and then the comments I got thereafter, and then the, you know, emails and direct messages from that post were all the same. They're like, oh my God, I need to readdress my protein intake. I'm not getting nearly enough. This looks like way too much. And it was yeah, it's how I had to get the point across that it's probably a lot more than you think it is. And to think that that is the minimum amount, and for some people they might need even more than that. It takes a lot of work to get enough protein in.
Yeah, so
if you click across that image, there's the,
oh,
does that image flick across?
okay. Nice. Yeah, I have a story about this. Like I talked to somebody probably for over a year, and and one day they were like, "Oh, hey Danny, I put my food into Chronometer, and it turns out I was getting about 40 grams of protein every day."
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
so again, this is I think the education part is really important. And if you can't, like, I couldn't tell you exactly how much protein that was, but again, I could probably eyeball it, and I think you just gain that ability from being a crazy food tracker for a long time if you have a history of doing that. But if you can't do that at all, like, yeah, it is good to measure and track your food, at least until you can kind of guess. And so,
well, exactly, and that's exactly right. And there are things like Chronometer you can certainly use, and I'm at the very beginning, I usually get people to log, at least a few times just to get a reference point as to what normal for them seems like. And then we can move away from tracking, all the time necessarily. And a lot of people are very resistant to doing it, or they find it very fiddly. And I want to get into a point where they don't necessarily need to rely on that too much, and that they can eyeball their day. They can, or just glance over, think about, I had that, okay, that's probably about, I'm only at about 60 grams. How am I going to get more in? But to be aware of what it looks like, definitely.
Yeah. Great stuff. And I wrote 2 papers down. So one, I'll read 2 of them. This was the Army study that Ray talked about a few times, and they say the military recommended dietary allowance for protein is 100 grams for a man and 80 grams for a woman. And then somebody, I think, I forgot who sent me, this person has done lots of work on the protein requirements being way higher than the RDA. And so this was one of the papers. I think somebody in the chat had sent me a while ago. And so I forget his full name. It's something Phyllis, but I think they were telling me to have him on the live stream at some point. And then this is about carbohydrate with protein. Maybe you could briefly talk about that. Why would you want to have maybe more carbohydrate than protein?
Well, you need to stockpile your liver with glycogen in order to fuel it so you can utilize the protein. Absolutely. And then without enough sugars coming in with the protein, you can cause yourself major low blood sugar. Then you can flip into high blood sugar when the body starts converting its own tissue to create sugars for the blood that you're not giving it. But just that stress, general stress cascade. And I think it's the hardest. It's one thing to get women in general to eat more protein, but then to suggest that you might need at least twice the amount of sugars to the protein you're getting in, that's a biggie. Very hard to shift from when they've generally come off low carb diets, keto diets, paleo diets. And as much as they're resistant, they do then consider, well, I did feel terrible eating like that. But to gradually get them to that point, you must find that tricky also.
Well, it's kind of funny, in the carnivore community, there's like a debate between high fat and high protein, but some of the high protein people are actually make more sense because you need more protein on like the super low carb diets because you're using it as fuel, and so so I thought that was interesting because I did horribly on a carnivore, zero carb, high fat, low protein. That's I gained maybe I probably gained tons of water, but I look like a blob of a person when I was on that for a few months. Okay, nice. Okay, so this next one is this gelatin, how you made it so thick. And so I'm actually interested how you do this. It took me like 2 years to figure out like how to make, I have it somewhere on my Instagram, but how to make like a real thick jelly. But I'm interested in your approach.
Oh, mine's pretty simple. I think first and foremost, the most important thing is finding the right cuts and joints. They need to be gelatinous cuts. Mm-hmm. I think it's when people just buy bags of bare bones, literally, to make a bone broth, and there's not much actual collagen in that or on that. So you need those joints which have the cartilage and, you know, the actual, even the skin, that's ultimately where it comes from. So if you need to boil your bones for 12 or 24 hours to yield that kind of rubbery jelly, I think you're using the wrong cuts to begin with. And as you know, Ray has taught us too, it's probably best to limit the time to perhaps 3 to 4 hours. Beyond that, you start to, you know, derange a lot of the proteins and bring out heavy metals too that you might not want to liberate. So if you can find those cuts that within 3.5 hours, you can get that kind of result once you've cooled it in the fridge, then they're usually the good bets. So I'll stick with oxtail, lamb neck, chicken carcasses, chicken wings. I use a lot. I've only done chicken feet once, and although they're awesome for their collagen, I could never do it again.
What? Because it's gross?
Oh my God, just seeing all those little claws come out of the top of the pot, and it was a bit off-putting. So, but I'll do a few dozen chicken wings at once, like brown them off first, get some color on them, because I think that makes it so much tastier. Put a bit of carrot, celery, onion, whatever you like. But even in a pressure cooker, just 30 minutes. And what you'll get after it's cooled down the next day is total jelly. Fantastic.
We'll get to the pressure cooker. So when I do it, I'll have oxtail, and the thing that I was screwing up for a long time, I was always adding water in throughout the cooking process. But that would always give me just like.
Oh, that would cool it.
Say it again.
Would that cool it down? You mean as you go?
I think it would cool it down and just like dilute the gelatin to where I'd have just like kind of just like water at the end. And so and the other thing was I would boil it, like get it to a boil and then put the top on, but I'd leave it like way too hot. But you're supposed to turn it down when you put the top on. I turn it down. Yeah.
Yeah. so I bring it to a simmer and then turn it down so it's just bubbling.
Yeah.
Leave the lid off. I reckon 3-4 hours, plenty.
Yeah. So again, not like putting a ton of water in it every time and doing it that way.
Yeah.
That was intelligent. But the thing you did hit on was using the bones, and this is something even vegans have pointed out, like against the paleo type diets, is that there's at least a few articles talking about it extracting, like you mentioned, lead into the water. And so I don't know where I saw this comment, but somebody had an anecdote and they were like, thank you for mentioning the lead, because I felt horrible every single time I drank like bone broth, and I could never figure it out. Who knows if that was exactly the reason or whatever, but I mean, it's not far off if in fact the bone broth is contaminated with lead.
That's why I don't even call it bone broth myself. I call it gelatinous broth.
Yeah.
Because I don't want just bone juice. I want gelatinous liquid that turns to jelly. And it doesn't necessarily come from bony bits. Even there's a good cut I've been using quite a bit this past year. If I'm doing like a casserole or a stew, but the oyster blade, which is the beef cut.
Okay.
I think it's got different names in different countries, but the oyster blade cut is fantastic because when you see it sliced, you can literally see the collagen marbled right through it, and there's almost no fat. There's no bone even. But when you make the slow cook stew with it, you'll get super tender meat, and then leftovers. If it's cooled down in the fridge, you'll see it, and you can stand your spoon in it. But it's awesome because when you use what do you use, oxtail?
Yeah.
It makes great stuff, but it's so tedious because the next day you've got to sit there pulling all the bits of bone out, all the tiny bits of bone. You've got to wait for that big layer of fat to cool off so you can slip it off, because I would just be nauseated trying to eat it. It's so fatty. So there's all these processes to it, whereas with the oyster blade, you just brown it off, put it with all the flavors you prefer, and eat it. And you've got a whole meal rather than just a liquid. Sometimes it's nice to get meaty bits and some actual solid food in there.
I'll have to try that. I've never even heard that cut before. So
I'll see if you don't have another term for it over there, but you should be able to get it in Thailand too, I imagine. It's good stuff. It's like when you use beef cheek as well. It's very, very gelatinous meat. Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, so next one is marshmallows, and so I've actually never made these before, and so
they're so easy.
But these
got to do it.
Yeah, these look very delicious. What is the process for making these?
I'm not a fiddly cook, and when I first read into marshmallows, you have to have a thermometer and you've got to check temperatures and all of that, and that would have put me off. But I just thought I'd wing it one day, and they worked, and they've worked ever since. But I think it's the recipe's right there, but I think it's the 3 tablespoons or so of actual gelatin as opposed to the hydrolyzed collagen, the gelling kind. You bloom it on some of the water, you heat the sugar and the water separately, and then you just pour it on, you whip it and you whip it and you whip it. And it could take 20 minutes or so. But it's like a big cloud, and then you just cool it off and slice it up, and it's delicious. But I'll use, like for this one, I used passion fruit pulp juice. I use berries and things like that. Get some different flavors in there, but it's a nice way to access a bit of gelatin and sugar. It, hits the spot pretty quickly.
For your clients, are you an advocate of gelatin? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Look, ideally, and I think from the beginning I would have said, it's best you make your broths and make broths from scratch and get a few cups of broth every day. It's funny, the things I used to recommend to women who were mothers before I was a mother. Mm-hmm. I used to say, you have to make everything from scratch. You've got to make your broth every week. You've got to be drinking this. You've got to be doing this. You've got to be making that for your kids. They can't have this. You can't do that. And then I became a mom. And I went through pregnancy. And it was this big, oh my God, I had no idea. So now I see having some gelatin, having some maybe hydrolyzed collagen on hand in your toolkit, like have it all. If something's going to make things more convenient, if you can use some gelatin and make something tasty like this, rather than, in the middle of summer, if you don't feel like sitting around drinking hot broth, then do it. You might not have access to certain cuts. Definitely, utilize all of it. And look, some people digest certain versions better than others, and we still figure out what's right for that person. But for the sake of convenience, if it means someone's going to be more compliant and actually get long-term gains from, finding a more convenient approach, then by all means.
I feel similarly. Okay, something we both have an affinity for is mushrooms. So this really changed the game for me, I felt like, because I think I was interested in, I was like starch curious for a long time, and then I was implementing them in my diet, like boiling potatoes and things, but they just never worked for me. They always gave me pretty bad digestive problems. And so I think when Ray came out with that newsletter, the mushrooms observations and interpretations, I think it changed my approach and made life a lot easier. And also, I'm sure you can concur with this, but like a lot of people that I talk to experience digestive problems in one shape, or either constipation, diarrhea, or gas. And the carrot salad is awesome, but I think mushrooms tend to work better than the carrot. And so again, I think we were both like gung-ho for exploring with mushrooms, but the question I always get is like the cooking time. And so do you want to run that down for everyone?
Yeah. Oh, and I agree about that. I see a lot of people do a carrot salad diet. Personally, I think I do so much better with the mushrooms, definitely. Yeah. I'll do them one of two ways. I'll either slice them, or I use my child labor and they chop mushrooms for me. They love it. So I figure I just line them up with bags of mushrooms. Keep them busy. And then I'll boil them, lid off, fan on for at least 1 hour, up to 3, whatever I've got time for. And then I'll keep that in the fridge, for a week or so, and you can, scoop out as many as you need at a time and just heat them up with some butter and salt, do what you want with them. As opposed to reboiling them every day. But once they're cooked, you can do things with them. Otherwise, when I discussed it with Ray once about better way to prep it and maybe to release more of the hydrozyme more readily, he suggested blending them first and then boil them while they're pulpy. So, giving them a good wash, literally blend them with just enough water to make them kind of liquidy. And then boiling that mixture, it just kind of looks like cow pat. Yeah. It's not very appetizing. But when I did them that way, they do work really well. But for me, it's super important that things are delicious. Otherwise, I find it hard to encourage a client to do it. Even for myself, I'm big on things having to taste good. Yeah. So you'll see on my mushroom article, my blog, I concocted, I don't know, a suggestion of a soup you can make with this brown mush, because if it's tasty, you're drawn to it. And each day you go, oh, when can I have my mushroom soup? Rather than going, oh God, I have to do it again. And for me, I'll spike it with, sour cream and lemon zest, some garlic, some thyme, more of a, I suppose, a Scandinavian approach, but you could do a Thai version, spicing.
Sour cream with mushrooms is so awesome. Yeah, thank you for
reminding
me. Yeah.
And needs to be garlic, because I was always amazed at you. Like, I'd see you post your mushrooms, and you do your mushed up mushroom, and you'd be like, here I am eating my mushroom, plain as plain. And I'm like, Danny's so much more hardcore than me. I could not do that.
No, just to be clear,
I have to make mine pretty and tasty.
Well, I have the similar thing. Like, I can't do something if I think it's gross. I could when in my early 20s, I could literally do anything, like eating wise. But now, if it's not delicious, I won't regularly be able to do it. Okay. What you're probably not saying is sometimes I'll like saute them in sugar and salt. And so if it's like salty and sweet, sometimes that's good. But I used to blend them before boiling, but it would just be a big mess. Like, how the bubbles will pop. Maybe I'm using too much.
And you got to stir it, or the bottom can burn. And
so it was,
so I think maybe chop them, boil them, maybe then blend them might be safer.
But that is interesting about that getting more rid of the hydrazine easier. So
I think so, getting more surface area, and that's another thing. I see people ask about maybe just pressure cooking your mushrooms rather than having to do the 3 hours, do it shorter time. But, when I'd speak to Jodie about that too, and she was very big on, we need to release that, through the steam, get it out, have your vent on full ball, because you don't even want to breathe that stuff in. So although your pressure cooker is going to release a fair bit of it, you're enclosing some of it. I mean, that's just my take on it. Maybe best to have the pot totally open and just suck it all up.
Yeah, I thought Ray had
may not be a big deal.
Yeah, I do not know. I thought Ray indicated that the Gelatin, or that's like in the hydrazine family or something, changes form or something. It's over my pay grade, but I need to get clarification on that at some point. Okay, so moving on. Well, oh no, what was this? Okay, so I wanted to mention this, the easy creamy spaghetti bolognese, and you use rice noodles for these. And so I thought that was a really intelligent approach. And then you put Parmesan on it as well.
Loads of Parmesan. And I'll even mix Parmesan into the recipe. And as traditional bolognese, they often finish it with a fair bit of milk in the actual dish as well, in the sauce. So milk's a bit of a base of mine as well. You can use some gelatinous stock in there if you want to. But yeah, definitely loads of Parmesan, and those flat rice noodles, the ones you can just soften just with hot water from a kettle, they suffice for us most of the time as pasta. So it's still got that feel. Not to say a bit of good quality wheat pasta is a bad thing. I'm not one for saying anything's bad and should be eradicated, because especially if it's in your culture and you've grown up with it and it gives you comfort. If you can tolerate it, then by all means, just don't have it every day or twice a day, obviously. But for people who don't do so well with wheat, then it would be a better, something to swap it around with.
What just a non-threatening good dish? There's nothing abnormal or weird about like this. And then did I read somewhere you put gelatin maybe in the tomato sauce, or am I crazy?
Yeah. Well, sometimes a lot of these recipes, ask for some stock anyway. So I'll use my own stock. Or if I run out, I'll bloom a bit of gelatin in a bit of water. And when they ask for a cup of water in the mixture, I'll put some bloom gelatin in with that as well. So why not? Because you're getting a bit of a balance of, your amino acids. So, I think they're good tricks. But at the same time, I'd hate to make people so particular and fastidious that they're worried that I can't enjoy my bolognese because there wasn't any gelatin and my amino acids are more inflammatory. I'd be like, no, just enjoy the bolognese. You'll be fine. But look, if you had time to fiddle around and you wanted to make it, I suppose, a better balanced concoction, then that could be something you could do.
I love it. Okay. Which one was this? Okay, just I mean, we've already touched on it a few times, but just your affinity for pressure cooker. Because I've never used one. I still haven't used one before. So
You should try that.
I know. I seriously need to. What are the things? Not obviously not the mushrooms, but the like any kind of gelatinous dish. This just makes life way easier, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, things that would take 3 hours, you can do in 45 minutes. Doing a chicken stock, for example, once you browned off all your bits, brought it to pressure, after that it's probably 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if you're time poor, or if you hadn't planned ahead and you're not very organized like I'm not very good at doing all my cooking on a Sunday and being prepped for the week. I just don't function that way very well. But you can whip things up quicker, and you can do them in quite big quantities. Most pressure cookers are quite big, so pretty handy. But I was always pretty terrified of them. I think my brother gave me one, and I was still a bit like, oh, I don't know if I can use this, but it's probably my most used thing in the kitchen now. Yeah, they're definitely pretty handy.
I need to give it. Whenever I say like 3 hours on a recipe, I think people instantly tap out on stuff like that. So
yeah. Well, I mean, it's what our grandmothers probably they've been around for a while, and they'll probably help to collapse the things we're trying to get out of these foods more readily too.
So this is a similar dish. This was a dinner in 10 minutes, green peeled wild Australian banana prawns, and I got 1 kilogram bags of frozen cannoning butchers.
Yeah, I get them frozen, and you can throw them in frozen. They cook really well that way too.
Brilliant idea. And then these are rice noodles too? So again, this is such a non-threatening, just good, solid dish, And so again, I would have never thought of something like this, and that's why you're a genius. So but
mine's very simple. Everything I do is very simple. I didn't even go by. Look, if you go on my Pinterest, if you're a Pinterest kind of person, because I used to collect recipes for different clients, and now I just put them all in categories on my Pinterest board, just for, I suppose, inspiration. Because if people get a bit stale with suggestions I've given them and they need to spice things up, sometimes a gorgeous photo of a dish can make you almost salivate and get excited, and then that inspires you when I get the ingredients and cook it, and increases your appetite as well. But I must say, for myself, I don't follow recipes very much. I tend to kind of go, what do I feel like? Haven't had prawns for a while, got some in the freezer, what would that be nice with? It's usually only that many ingredients, but it's got an A, B, easy and tasty that my kids are going to be drawn to as well. And that's usually the things my kids want are the things that are usually the good choices. I think it's interesting with children. They want to keep it pretty simple anyway. But one thing and I've got it written on my computer here because it's probably my favourite quote from Ray. And this was another thing when I reflect on how we were told to learn nutrition. It wasn't even brought up, but the whole importance of deliciousness, I think, is super underrated. And I'll read you this quote because I just love it. But he says, just eating what you consider to be the most delicious food can greatly help the intestines secrete more juices so things digest faster and move along more smoothly. And it's like you can analyze the food to the nth degree, get it all, but if you prep this food up, which might be good for you or antibacterial or prothyroid, whatever that may benefit is, if it's not tasty to your taste buds and it doesn't fit your palate, then if you don't salivate, you're not going to trigger the secretion of your juices and you're not going to get the most from that food. So
thank you.
Super important.
Thank you for bringing that up. And something I think is an example of that, at least an example in my own life, is how people say, oh, take liver by making it an ice cube and then putting it in your mouth and swallowing it. Whenever I would do that, I would be like, I usually make the cubes too big. And so that was probably my main issue. But I do it and I get them down, but like be gagging doing it. But it always digests terribly. And so I could only think that that whole forceful process was not really doing me any favors because it was so gross that it was just not even digesting. And so I think you're really right. And even though your dishes are about 100,000 times more delicious than mine, I eat food that I think is delicious. I'm trying to make food that's as appetizing as possible, even though it's kind of college style food. And so that is something, again, that is out of step with the kind of mainstream or even alt low carb. They're all trying to kill their appetite. And like there's a Han Selye quote, and it's like, one of the first signs of sickness in an organism is a loss of appetite. And so I
absolutely
100% agree with them. Yeah.
I think it's one of the first things when I start with a client. You ask them about their mornings. How do you feel when you wake up? How's your appetite in the morning? Which, you know, is a big alarm bell as to where their stress levels are at. And more often than not, they'll say, oh, no, I'm not really hungry for breakfast, or I can do without breakfast. I'm fine, as if that's kind of a good thing. So yeah, I mean, just in regards to getting their stress levels down, you're not going to make impacts until you can get them eating and being excited about the eating part of it. So, and finding within each client, I think, to go, what are the things that excite your taste buds personally? And this is where I stopped many years ago from writing people a diet plan. I don't do that. Yeah, and if people come to me now and say, I'd like to work with you, I need a diet plan written for 3 weeks, and I need, you know, I just kind of go, I'm sorry, I put that. But it doesn't work for anyone in the long term, because I need to educate you about how you need to figure out food to work for you personally. And only you can answer those questions. I can't even answer them for you. But, you know, I can suggest what are the foods that could really benefit you, but even still, we've got to find a way to prepare them that you get excited about. And it may not be how I would like it, but it's got to be tasty to you.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so this is when I buy bread, which isn't often. This is our favorite, and so 100% spelt sourdough. And so what's the difference between this type of sourdough or sourdough in general than the type of maybe wheat or white bread that you would encounter normally?
Yeah, I don't think it's that huge. I mean, spelt is a old-fashioned kind of wheat, really. Mm-hmm. Probably hasn't been hybridized so much. And I think it depends on the person and their own sensitivities. But I do see people who couldn't eat grains of any sort. If they get a properly prepared sourdough bread, they can tolerate wheat better than if they're just eating wheaty pasta or wheaty biscuits. So the sourdough process being so important to sort of breaking down the gluten somewhat and pre-digesting the starches. We just happen to be able to get access to this particular spelt sourdough. And personally, I prefer the spelt over the wheat only because I like the taste of it. That's, you know, and my kids really like it. So there could be more potential, you know, digestive ease, I suppose, with spelt over conventional wheat. But when I do get wheat, that goes down similarly for us. But yeah, we don't eat a hell of a lot of it, but I must say my kids love a toasted cheese sandwich, and we can butter it up and put really good cheeses in it, and there's just nothing better.
Well, I was going to say too, if it's like a vehicle for pate or something, I think
exactly
that would be important. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. Oh, that's the thing when we talk about pate or preparing liver in some way, and people say, well, do you think I could have toast with that? I'm like, absolutely. If that's going to be, like you said, the vehicle to carry that in you, that's your opportunity. Yeah.
And semi off topic, but Rob Turner was the one that turned me on to mixing ground beef with liver too. So I think that's something that is really intelligent. And sometimes there was like a butcher in San Francisco that would automatically package his meat like that. So I think Rob had an online source of somebody that did that too. And so that's another way of eating liver.
Well, yeah. And even I've had my local butcher, there's a couple around Melbourne I can put people onto if they're in Melbourne, but on request, you can get sausages made up, and they'll put 5 or 10% liver in the sausage mix. So it's kind of incorporated already. So that's handy, keep them in the freezer. But yeah, hiding in is you know, works for some people.
Okay, we kind of talked about oxtail a lot, so let me skip this one. What's the next one here? Brownies. Okay, so and then you use the Saturé. I'm saying that right, hopefully. The casein, which I've yet to try supplemental casein, but again, I think protein supplements are not a bad idea given our earlier back and forth about how difficult it can be a lot of time to obtain enough protein. And so you used Saturé, the casein, to make these, and how did you do that?
So this is a little sideline company I've put together with Kitty Blomfield. Would they all know Kitty through? You've spoken with her? Or?
I don't. My I'm sure my audience is aware of her, and I just want to say, Kitty, I would not be able to do any of this without Kitty and people like Kitty and Craig, because just they're huge supporters of mine. And so if you enjoy this stuff, like thank Kitty, because they have carried me through rough situations, and I just have the utmost I'm appreciative towards them, because they're huge supporters of mine. So I have just nothing but
Kitty just makes things happen, doesn't she? She's a fireball.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I was the one with Kitty. She'd say, Emma, I'm going to get you on live streams and podcasts. And I was like, no, I hate the camera. I don't do this sort of thing. And she would just keep at me until I would break. But she, in a nutshell, about a year ago, because we both get questions from clients saying, I'm being so cautious about what I'm eating. I've cleaned up my pantry. I'm super cautious of the poofer in my food. But then I realized I'm slathering body moisture all over myself every day, from Nivea, and it's full of sunflower oil or whatever. Is that a concern? And we go, well, yeah. So people would then start saying, what should I use on my body and what should I use on my face? And up until that point, we really didn't have any particular brand or product. We were there's a couple of small companies around, but they weren't easily accessed within Australia particularly. So she calls me one day and she goes, Emma, we're going to make skincare. I'm like, what? Oh, no, really? Okay. All right, we'll look into it. So we started formulating. A year later, we're still formulating. It's been more challenging than we anticipated to get a super, super clean product. But while that was all happening, there were always a handful of products, or I suppose pro-metabolic kind of substances that we'd want to access for our clients that we just couldn't really get, particularly in Australia, like the good Italian cascara. We're doing liver capsules, and then casein kept coming up more and more in my research too, and seeing the benefits of maybe adding a bit of casein to the diet. But I was shocked to find there was not a casein product in Australia, at least, that didn't have sunflower lecithin, anti-caking agents, fillers. They were horrendous, even the most 100% pure ones. So then Kitty's on my back going, we're going to have to manufacture casein. I'm like, what? Really? So we did. Anyway, so yeah, I've been experimenting with it, because on its own, if you've ever tasted it, it does not taste good. So you've got to put it into things, mix it up, make it tasty. So experimenting with using it as a base for brownies, which I think come out pretty well. Making hot chocolates, making smoothies, making custards and things like that. So there's certainly ways you can get it in. And obviously casein is already rich in your cheeses, but I think when people are already cautious that they might be overdoing the fat, there's only so much cheese they can get in before they start to really hinder their progress as well. So it can be one of these handy things to keep on hand.
Yeah, that's interesting you bring up. Yeah, you guys haven't even made a cosmetic yet. So you guys have
We've got the second round of the formula, because the first round I had my very strict list of this is the stuff I want to access, this is the ingredients I want to have, these are the ingredients I don't want to have. They went away, spent a few months formulating in their lab, came back with a product, and Danny, you should have seen the ingredients they just put in there without even, it was just hydrogenated vegetable oils and whatnot. It's like, do you not get the concept of what we're trying to create? And I'm not a confrontational person. I was so angry.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're back to the drawing board. And they said, oh, we were just trying to cut costs for you and increase shelf life. And I'm like, this is not the product we're trying to make. We're actually just trying to make something super, super nourishing. And, you could put it on your baby's bum and know that it's safe if they absorb it in their bloodstream. Like, that's what we want. So then they were like, now we think we've got it. So we're on round 2 or 3 now, and starting to come together, but it's very tricky because we're going through a kind of standard industry approved, manufacturer formulator. So, the preservatives they use are all kind of industry standard stuff that have their own excipients and junk in there. Everything they use is very industry standard. We're trying to get away from that. I'm calling on very old-fashioned ingredients that I discussed with Ray and Georgie about too, which are not as available, and the industry doesn't approve of them because they're probably not, patented and have had safety studies done on them, money put into them. So it's been a real challenge, but We'll get there one day.
You bring up a good point. It's like, don't try not to put anything on your skin that you wouldn't feel comfortable eating, you know? And I think that's
Absolutely.
a good rule of thumb. And Andrew Kim, a long time ago, like I think linked me a paper that it was like just putting PUFA on the skin, like the local area, it started taking up calcium. And so like calcium is like one of the signs that a cell is in trouble, and then it starts producing nitric oxide, I think. And so it's like kind of the end of the cell life cycle. And so that just can't be good for skin aging. Like, and so I'm always curious how, again, I don't think I'm some specimen or anything, but I know people that put so much stuff on their face. And so I'm just always curious of like how that is affecting them overall.
Absolutely. And it's literally our biggest organ, and we're rubbing this stuff in it, and it's not evaporating away, it's going in. You know, even if it's only a small percentage is making its way into your bloodstream or into your deeper tissue. If you didn't want to eat it, you don't want it sitting there. And so many things, you know, particularly like the mineral oils, they accumulate. They just don't go away. They just accumulate.
Yeah. Right.
And they're in everything. They're just in everything.
In nutrition for women, Ray, do you know why they're specifically harmful? I haven't read that much about it.
The mineral oils?
Yeah, it's a source of polyunsaturated fats?
It's more, I think Ray said molecularly, they're so small, the body can't metabolize them, and they do just accumulate in the tissue. Yeah, he sent me a whole lot of, if anyone's interested, I can send some research links and things. I've got reams and reams of stuff I've accumulated about it all, but mineral oil molecularly is tiny. Yeah.
So this one, we're almost done here, and then we can move on to questions, and then I'll let you go. You've been so generous with your time, Emma. So you say, easy lunch with a latte, and you quote Ray, and you say, a deficiency of copper causes our tissues to retain an excess of iron. So foods such as shrimp and oysters, which contain abundant copper, should be used regularly. And I thought this was interesting. If I go here and find it. Yeah. In Ray's Generative Energy book, this quote really stood out to me. And he says, I think this chronic loss of copper accounts for the obvious features of aging, such as the loss of elasticity of the skin, lungs, and blood vessels, the depigmentation, demelanization of the skin hair, and in Parkinson's disease, substantia nigra, and for decreases in respiratory capacity. And so I wanted to harp on this a little bit because I probably not this audience, but a lot of people think there's such thing as copper toxicity. And so I know that is a thing in like Wilson syndrome or whatever, but a lot of people are just generally fearful of copper. But I thought this was important to know because there's a different view of that. And people like Ann Gittleman, Andy Cutler, and Carl Hofer are big anti-copper people, but I think they're incorrect with their copper hate.
I think it's when you start to figure out why is that person showing up with, you know, copper toxicity levels. Is it because directly the food they're eating is so low with copper and they need to cut out the food? I highly doubt it. I think it's more stemming from an estrogen dominant, imbalance. And yeah, that's something I've discussed with Ray a bit about, but it was definitely a link with estrogen. And I know way back, I had a few clients who were told they were high copper toxic load, and they were told to stop eating almonds and stop eating shellfish and all of this. But if you looked at what they'd eaten leading up to it, they hardly touched almonds, they hardly even ate shellfish. And you go, well, I don't think it's purely ingested copper that's the issue. What is causing this imbalance and this accumulation to occur? Oh, that's.
I pulled up this article. This is Vladimir Valtsu Heiskanen, and this article is just kick ass. He again, I'm not an expert on this or anything, but I think in inflammatory situations, copper can increase in the blood, but it's like an anti-inflammatory. It's anti-cyclooxygenase 2, so the same enzyme that aspirin works on. And so I think it's something that is kind of like blamed for different health problems, when in reality it's he like addresses these things, the copper paradoxes in serum levels and inflammation. And so, and in his research, he's very, very good at what he does. So,
even to figure out how have you been diagnosed to be copper toxic, And more often than not, people I've seen, it's from hair mineral analysis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when I was talking to Ray about that, he says they're highly inaccurate. Often it's showing what the body is leaching and expelling as opposed to what is staying in the tissue.
Yeah.
So maybe your body is just dumping it through the hair, or is that a true sign of what the body's holding on to? That's questionable. Then he put me on to toenail mineral analysis.
Yeah.
And said, if you ever want to, analyze things from cuttings, your toenail is apparently more accurate than your hair.
Well,
that's interesting to consider.
Well, I think, again, if you subscribe to the bioenergetic context, the respiratory enzymes, like the cytochrome C oxidase, that is like copper dependent, and that slows down with aging. It kind of makes more sense that copper is lost versus that it accumulates. And so I just appreciated him for pointing that out. Because again, I just didn't have any foundation for understanding why copper wouldn't accumulate, because I treated myself for copper toxicity for years. And so I was just totally up the creek with understanding what was going on here. And I just had bad information that I was working with. Okay, that was that. And then I think these last two were, do you have Instagrams that you enjoy? Because this play.fuel Jenny Piella, I think this Instagram is like fantastic. And then
I do know hers. Yeah, gorgeous.
And then maybe you linked this other one, Robin, Simplifying Wellness.
Yeah, I love hers. It's got beautiful photos too.
Yeah. So yeah, these are stellar. And is there any other ones that I'm forgetting?
That other guy, Danny Roddy. He's pretty good.
You got me. I was like, so yeah. Okay. Yeah. Definitely check these people out, because they are good at taking photos.
Well, this is the, and it's nice when it's presented nicely too. It's sort of
really
enticing.
Yeah, it really changes things. Okay. So let's get to these. Let's get to some questions, and then we can wrap things up here. Or is there anything we did not talk about that you want to touch on?
That fruit article, is probably the most common way people find me, is from that article. Or the thing they said flipped them a little bit, and they've been doing things, eating the way they were meant to and restricting their sugars, and someone might have shared it. But that was probably the article that I had to write for myself when I was trying to process the enormity of, oh my God, maybe sugars aren't bad. Oh my God, maybe I need to eat a lot of sugar, to almost justify or explain to myself that it's okay and that it works. So this is probably a summary of the research I did for myself personally, and then summarizing that. So I think it's one that has been helpful, and it's very simple. And I think a lot of the stuff I do, I try to, I suppose, simplify the things that I learned from Ray or pick up from Georgie and whatnot. It's they're very good at waffling off in their freakish genius language, and I'll have a lot of my clients listen to their interviews and read their articles, and they go, I think I get it. That sounds amazing, but I don't get it. But I don't even understand what I just heard. So I feel like I'm maybe a translator of that for them, because ultimately the question they'll ask is, well, that sounds amazing and all, but what does that mean for my breakfast? What should I eat for breakfast? Yeah. So I think when it comes to then applying all this incredible information into the simple stuff, that's become what I do, I think.
Well, not to put you on the spot, but what would your elevator pitch for sugar be if you had to explain it to them quickly?
I think when you give them a breakdown of how glucose is the preferred fuel to the cell, full stop. And when you're speaking to women who are pregnant or have children, and you explain to them how the body even takes the glucose and even converts it into fructose in order, it's preferred to the fetus, especially when they've come off the dogma of fructose particularly being so dangerous and something to avoid, entirely, for them to realize that, oh, but hang on, if the fetus prefers that, how can it be a toxic thing? Like that sounds pretty fundamental. And then I suppose taking them through their symptoms and explaining how so many of them are, related to hypoglycemia, and the stress state that is. I think just presenting in a way that makes them realize that their own bodies are showing those signs.
This is a very lowbrow like point of view, but my brain actually broke when I thought about fruitarians. And so when I was in my low carb mindset, I was like, what you might be able to say that fruitarians are malnourished. You might be able to say they're crazy or whatever you want, but you really can't say they're fat. Like, and so how can you say that like fructose and whatever is like the main reason for obesity when you have all these fruitarians? And again, you could say a bunch of things about them, but you really they're criticized for being emaciated. And so again, well, how does this work? And then one of the things in that community is eating like 2,000 or 3,000 calories. And so again, I'm sure we'll have some argument.
I think that's a really good one too. And I think when it comes to parenting and children, and they're worried about their children and childhood obesity and diabetes and all of that. I mean, I think my kids are a pretty good example of it. They have sugar on tap. I mean, in good ways. They drink more orange juice and fruit juice than they drink water. We've always got a full fruit bowl. We're always making brownies or marshmallows and meringues or something like that. And if they come to me and they're looking a bit tired and they say, Mum, can I have a sweetie? I'm like, yeah, of course. And, I'll have good sweets or things we've made. But they never abuse it. You never see them kind of going overboard because they get what they need and then they're good. And you could not find an inch of fat on either of those kids. They are just, like my daughter is just like washboard. And she has friends who are not allowed to have juice at home, not allowed to have anything like that. And you kind of go, I don't know. I mean, it's one example, but definitely the fruitarians. I don't think you have many obese people that became obese because of eating too much papaya.
Yeah, and again, I'm not progressing that as an argument. I'm just saying that broke my brain as a low carb person because it was something I had to deal with.
And those observations speak louder than the information, I think. Also,
I met Lustig in 2011. And I was like, and I think there might be an old video on the Ancestral Health Symposium of me asking him about fruitarians, and his answer was like so dumb of like why it was something I can't remember what it was, but I remember even at the time my like little amount of understanding, it was like a really weak reply to the question. So
I should tell you my story one day when I met David Wolf. He was in my house.
Holy smokes! Don't keep everybody in suspense.
For another time.
Okay.
Interesting people.
Okay, let's get to these. Let me switch back views here. Again, Emma, thank you so much. Sincerely appreciate it. Thank you for getting rid of the curse of the Emma live stream. That always something always goes wrong. So appreciate it. And thank you everybody in the chat, and thank you for everybody watching this in the future. Please give this episode a like and subscribe, and go follow Emma on the Nutrition Coach on Instagram, her website, the nutritioncoach.com.au, and then Facebook as well, which you guys can see all the links on the screen. They should be there. And is there anything else that they should know about? And Saturate, they should go check out that as well.
What is that? Saturate_official. That's the things we're dabbling in there.
I forgot to put it on the screen, but that is in the show notes that I'll put. So yeah, saturate.com.au.
And to pull it together, everyone probably figured it out, but saturate means saturated, because that was the first reason we did what we did, was to try and create some topical products that were totally saturated.
Here is my favorite picture on the internet right here.
This
is such a good photo. I love it. Okay.
We didn't know how to pose. We're a bit awkward.
Okay, so let's get to these. I think we only had one or two super chats. Okay, my feed thing totally didn't work. Let's get to let me have you answer one of these questions, and then I'll look for the super chats. We kind of went over this, but maybe we could keep it short, not to get too long. But Ann Bush, she says, I wish I knew how to meet my daily core nutritional needs, meaning how to meet the minimum nutrition requirements for the average person. I know everyone's needs are different, but it would be so nice to have a starting point. Why is it so difficult to meet basic requirements? I'm overwhelmed. What are your thoughts on that?
Yep, that's pretty much what I do every day. Getting people to figure out those basic requirements. I think it depends on what they're coming off, how much they've lowered their metabolic rate to, you know, how much food they can manage to eat before they start putting on necessary stores of fat. So I guess initially shifting the quality of the food before they necessarily add the calories. And that's, again, a very personal thing. But I think with, you know, what Ray talks about, you know, make sure you're covering dairy or calcium in some form. Make sure you're getting in some sugars, some orange juice. You know, the liver and oysters, I just don't think you can do this well without them in some form. Absolutely. But I think even beyond that, to just keep reminding people that get sunlight, get daylight, get red light. Look at how you can help facilitate better sleep. Are you having a really, really, really good, satisfying poo daily, at least twice? Because they could just be so focused on what they're taking in, and they're taking all the supplements and doing all the stuff. But then you ask them, you know, how frequently do you have a bowel motion? And they'll say once every 3 days. And if you're not getting a hell of a lot of stuff out the other end, you know, it's moving along, that backlog is so toxic. So it might not be that you're not eating the perfect food, it's just that you're not moving it through. And doing things to help facilitate that.
I love that. So I get my elevator pitch for this whole thing is usually focusing on the metabolic rate as represented by the pulse and temperature, obtaining full nutrition. And so I think that would, like you said, include liver, oysters, eggs, maybe coffee as a source of magnesium, salt, and a juice.
Yeah,
even.
salt.
And so, like, those things, if a person isn't familiar with nutrition, those are some of the most nutritious foods widely available. And so you're just like fortifying the nutrition way, and you're making it, I think, easy on yourself by including those foods because they contain such a massive amount of nutrition. And then I think, and then the last thing, so increasing the metabolic rate, as represented by pulse and temperature, obtaining full nutrition. You could probably say measure your vitamin D level in there too, if that, because I think that's so important. Yeah. And then the last thing would be solving constipation, diarrhea, or gas, because I think that those things would trip a person up indefinitely if they were not addressed in some way. And there's many different ways to do that. And so, and you and I and many other people have written things about that. So, but yeah, I empathize with this person, and again, one of the reasons I was attracted to Ray was the simplicity of kind of eschewing many supplements and using foods to fortify the nutrition in a way that seemed reasonable. And yeah, again, if canned oysters has about as much zinc as a supplement, and so using those regularly, I think, is a really valuable thing. But if a person doesn't know that they contain an abundance of zinc, maybe it's just like totally useless and they wouldn't include them.
Absolutely.
One question I did want to get to that I thought was up your alley, this Moon Spanger one, and they say, what does Emma think, or this minute, they say any ideas? I thought this was, maybe I'm thinking of a different question. Anyways, what does Emma think of the salt recommendations for babies/toddlers? Less than 1 gram for 12 months, less than 2 grams for 3 years. Do you have any experience with that?
I probably never measured anything in regards to my kids or gone by recommendations. I think it's interesting when you just leave kids to their own devices a little bit and see what they'll gravitate towards. They won't readily overeat salt. They know when they've had enough. Same with the sugars. I do think in regards to salt recommendations across the board, they're all way too low. I don't know if you agree with that. I think we all need a lot more salt, and not to, stress about salt intakes quite so much. I think we could probably do with more, but probably depends on the age too. I know both my babies, they nursed till they were 3.5, and I had to force them off. So they had long stints of breastfeeding, and they didn't even show interest in solids till they were 8-9 months old. Mm-hmm. And even then it was literally them just grabbing something off my plate that they liked the look of and they'd gnaw on it, but they didn't eat a lot of solid food even before they were 10-11 months old. So their requirements were all based on what I could provide them, literally. And they did really well like that. I know other babies seem to be drawn to solids earlier, so probably a different scenario. But when you look at what's naturally in breast milk, and there is a decent sodium component, and fats and the sugars and the proteins, the calcium, you know, they're pretty covered, but I wouldn't sort of hold back on the salt. If they tend to like something salty, I would go with it. They'll probably know. Is that too much of a fluffy answer?
No, I think that was good. And the second part of that was any ideas for constipation in babies, toddlers? And they say when first introducing foods, for example, but also later, which foods could be the culprit?
Yeah, obviously I want to see exactly what they're eating.
Yeah.
That's their mainstay. But more often than not, I'd see grains and wheat and rice being the things that would probably bind them up more readily. So, and I see most kids are sort of eating bread, wheat, probably 3 times a day, pasta, noodles, toast, you know, it's that sort of recurring thing. So maybe you change that up a little bit. Even if just having some carrot sticks around can make a big difference, but allowing them to have fruit in abundance, I think good, sweet, watery, you know, soluble fibrous fruit can be super helpful. I don't know if I should say it, both my kids love coffee. Like they literally love coffee. Also just turned 5, but since he was 4, you know, get up in the morning. So where's my coffee? But they'll have, I know it makes me a bad parent, but they'll have a half shot espresso each, milk, couple of sugars, and they just savor that in the mornings. I think that probably, and their bowels seem good, whether that is additional help, additional magnesium is going to.
Well, that is fun.
I mean, you look at, sorry?
No, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, you look at, you know, I've got friends who grew up in Italy, and within their culture that they weren't discouraged from having a little espresso in the mornings. And you know, I grew up in a half Greek family. My yaya would always offer us the thick Greek, you know, the Turkish coffee from any age, and dip your biscuit in it. And so I think we do tiptoe around a little bit too much in our Western culture that kids shouldn't have this, or you shouldn't have that when you're pregnant, or I don't know. I think relax a little bit today.
Well, somebody did write Ray, and they're like, do coffee and coconut oil have a value in the diet when maybe a person is generally healthy? And Ray's reply was, at least for coffee, like yes, because of how nutritious it was. And so I think if you make a strong cup of coffee, like you said, it's a good source of magnesium. I think Ray said it's 40 milligrams of magnesium per strong cup of coffee, like drip coffee. And then it has the niacin, and there's like 1,000 other substances supposedly in coffee. So I think...
Well, and it wasn't that I was ever force-feeding coffee, but they'd eat the froth off my coffee, and then they'd have a sip and another sip, and before I knew it, they'd stolen mine. So I thought, oh, maybe do I?
I love it.
Oh, and sorry, gelatin, gelatinous things I think would be super helpful for the intestine. So making them jellies and making them marshmallows, I mean, you know, having a gelatinous, you know, casseroles and things.
Brilliant. And we'll move on after this, but the Colin Rico says, what does a typical day of eating look like for both you and Danny?
Do you want to start?
Well, we are in strange times right now. So this is about as unoptimal. Is that a word? Unoptimal. Like time. Like, so I'm close to a grocery store that is becoming increasingly security focused, and there's like new hoops I have to jump through every single time I want to go into this mall to go to the grocery store. And last time I went in, the whole mall smelled like the most intense cleaner that I've like ever smelled, and it like burned my throat, like breathing in the air in the mall. So they must have cleaned it down with something. And then there's a guard that will watch you wash your hands before going in, and then you get temperature checked. And so it's crazy. And then, but the what I'm getting at is the grocery store is not that good. So I only have access to milk, thank goodness, and then an egg a day, and I'll go to Starbucks and get a coffee and like pour it in here with some castor sugar. And then I had there's a online retailer here called Paleo Robbie, and they have liver. And I had them ship liver to this hotel, and I keep it in the mini fridge. And then so again, I don't think anybody should eat this way, but it's just kind of, I'm on bare bones because I really have to stay here. And so again, that's about, I don't prefer eating this way, but it's kind of survival mode. What about you?
Oh, pretty lucky here, touch wood, for now at least. We've got a great little store around the corner and it's full all the time. So fresh food and butcher and everything right there. But yeah, the basis of my day, particularly my morning, is probably milky coffee for the most part of the morning. And then it might be fruit or stewed fruit I've done, some cheese element. I really love salty cheese and marmalade. That's like a bit of a go-to snack for me. It really varies every day. It certainly does, but leftovers from the night before for lunch, perhaps. More coffee, more cheese. Rotate meat with seafoods. But yeah, lamb chops. Lamb chops are a big one for us. Couldn't go without lamb chops.
Two more here, and then we'll move on to the super chats. Ellie says, what are some of the good substances that can be applied on the face?
Yeah, good one. This has been everything I've been digging into of late. But I would think what we were talking about, niacinamide is always a good one. It's helpful for the general, energy of the skin cells, but also fine lines and acne and things like that. It's really beneficial. Inflammation and pigmentation. Definitely the saturated fats. As you know, they're going to be more stable. Cholesterol as an actual ingredient is UV protective, and they found that, in older skin, the naturally occurring progesterone levels at the skin level are at least halved, and that usually correlates with sort of collapse of the structure of the skin and wrinkling. So adding cholesterol, whether it even be from lanolin, if you can't get straight up cholesterol, there's a source of it. What else? I'll see some from even vitamin K or CoQ10 work similar. Those sort of quinones directly on the skin as well. Urea is a fantastic one as a hydrator. Reduces that water loss from the skin. That'd be probably some of my favorites.
I love it. Thank you for that, Ellie. The last question I want to get on here was from Tommy, and they say, question for both. If you could eat only 5 different foods / products, what would they be? No supplements.
Oh, only 5? That's tricky.
I had given this thought, but I don't remember my what my things were. Do you know what yours would be?
Could a sweet milky coffee be one food? Turn that one food.
Well, it's way more difficult if you don't make that, because I would have trouble. I would say, yeah, like milk, coffee, and just white sugar would be important for me, but I wouldn't want to have just milk and coffee. But then I thought, well, maybe if you have milk and coffee and you have a really great source of orange juice, it would kind of sub in for the sugar, and then maybe add some liver and I don't know, maybe oysters, and that would call it that would be 5. But again, I wouldn't like love that or anything, but that would cover a lot of bases, I feel like.
What about if it was what you love though?
Yeah, like Ray said a long time ago, like tortillas and cheese, and I think that, eating quesadillas or whatever would be way more appetizing in the long run, I think, than frequently eating liver and stuff. So I think you could take it.
Yeah, I'd have to have some cheese there. I really appreciate marmalade. I think marmalade.
Good. Yeah.
Is a good with the cheese or with, on its own.
Maybe lamb for sure. Lamb is so delicious. Yeah.
Prawns. For me, I have to have, I know it's not a necessity, but for my palate is, but I have to have curried, like Thai flavors, curries. Like for me, that gets me salivating. That's, spice up your prawns that way. Bit of coconut. Yes. Do you enjoy the food over there?
We talked about this last time. It is like crack cocaine to me. Like if I will eat a Thai dish, because again, I do cook like kind of boring college food. I like it, but it's not even on the same stratosphere as Thai food. And so my girlfriend will say, like, will taste my food and be like, no delicious. And so so she is very like tuned into Thai food flavor, and they reject food that doesn't taste good, of course, and it's like a cultural thing for them. And so
lime and sugar and good
Yeah,
stock, and yeah.
yeah. I mean, a good tom yum soup is like just so intoxicating, and so yeah, they really have it
So
nailed
good.
down. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of salt. Got to be a lot of salt.
and MSG.
Yeah, Mr. Probably.
Okay, let's get to these few super chats. Ellie just sends a unicorn, and so thank you so much, Ellie. Appreciate that. Vicky Lashenko, I never get tired of saying your name, Vicky, and she says, "Hi Emma, I'm nursing. I'm a nursing mama and been peeing for about 3 months, but gaining weight significantly. Why? Healing process. Also taking T3 if that helps."
Tell her to shoot me a rundown of what she's eating in general, if that helps. But
Vicky, if you say what you're eating in the comments, I'll read it out. But what if somebody was struggling with weight loss in general and they were nursing, which is important? What would you say?
Well, it probably depends to how far into the nursing she is, because often, I mean, you need some excess weight to support you in the nursing. You know, you need some energy on you, definitely. And the weight loss should really start to drop away naturally just from the process of breastfeeding, whether it's 2 months into feeding or a year. I mean, if she was still gaining weight after a year, I'd say, well, what else would look into? Certainly, and potentially thyroid. But if it's early days, I'd say just stick with it and just keep feeding, feed on demand, and don't discourage yourself from eating enough throughout it, because even if she's seeing the weight increase, I still say you've got to keep your own energy supply up. I mean, the requirements for nursing, even compared to pregnancy, are so much higher on all levels of your nutrients. So, yeah, I'd probably want to know more about her timeline and what she's getting in, but welcome to shoot me questions about that.
Yeah, that was, I do have a paper, and I think it was like you need 600 more milligrams of calcium per day when you're nursing, or maybe it's 400 or 600. Yeah, so that if you already need about 1,500 or 2,000 milligrams, that's a lot of calcium, of course. And then I have another paper that talks about prolactin being a diabetogenic hormone, and so that again, I haven't studied this, but I imagine it's easy to get prolactin out of control if the metabolic rate is low and you're nursing and you don't have enough calcium. So that seems like
and you've got a lot of estrogen. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. No, it's huge. And then if you look to any outside media advice, you're now breastfeeding or you just made a baby, there's just this constant pressure to just, lose the baby weight and start post-baby dieting. Well, regardless of whether you're breastfeeding, it's shocking.
Well, it's funny you say that. Like on the Danny Roddy weblog Instagram, like I never go on there, and I rarely go on there and like search through profiles and stuff. I hardly ever log into it. But when I do and I go to the explore page, it's like a fresh explore page, and all of it's just like workout, like muscular workout girls. And again, this is like a uncurated explore page, and so again, that's like shoved in a person's face right when they go on to Instagram, and I just thought it was a little bit odd why that was.
Oh, yeah, the pressure to diet post baby is just crazy. But at the same time, I'd like to, hopefully give encouragement that you can breastfeed long term, you can eat to your heart's content, and you shouldn't need to have to put on weight. I mean, I personally didn't, and I've been at this and I haven't restricted a thing. If anything, I found it a challenge to eat enough and keep on enough weight. A funny conversation I had with Ray once was when I was really struggling. I had my second. I was feeding all the time and looking after another child and getting broken sleep continuously, and it's just so exhausting. It's a huge commitment. And I just remember thinking, on top of all this, I'm meant to be eating so much and I can't get around to preparing anything. I grab what I can, but I'm just not able to get enough calories in. And I said to Ray something like, any tips on getting more in? And all he said was, do you reckon you could drink more milk? That was it. And I was like, yeah. So I was like, good. I can walk past the fridge and I can drink milk. But I just love that it's so doable. It's not about, anything fiddly or, accessing anything too extreme. It was just drink more milk.
It's not about fasting for 48 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Vicky did actually write what she was eating. Where is it? Milk, beef, raw cheese, orange juice, lots of eggs, and milk, 2 years nursing.
More sugars, perhaps. Less eggs, perhaps.
Milk, beef, raw cheese, orange juice, lots of eggs, and milk. Yeah, I mean, I've never experienced this, but Ray did talk about the insulinogenic properties of eggs, and that's something vegans also talk about, how they can lower the blood sugar. And so
I can't even do more than half an egg. They really affect me.
Oh,
and the others that can do a couple, but most of the time I recommend, usually for women with blood sugar handling issues, you're best maybe sticking to one egg at one time at one meal. You know, if you want to have 2 eggs a day, sure, but perhaps spread them out. But didn't Ray say something like or maybe this was Dodie talking to me about this, but she suggested that the amount of sugar you might need for 1 egg to offset the blood sugar lowering effect could be up to 1 liter of orange juice.
Whoa, okay. I've heard 10. Ray said 10 ounces, but that's what he said for him. So I don't know.
Right,
you're right. It might be way different for another person.
Yeah, it can be as much as that. And you know, for a lot of women I'm seeing who are quite new to this too, and they're struggling to have more than half a cup of orange juice because they think it's kind of naughty. To then suggest that if you want to have more than that in regards to how many eggs you have at a time, are you willing to have that much orange juice with it? It's a lot. Just to give you the idea of how, you know, blood sugar lowering the protein of that egg could be.
Good stuff. Thank you, Vicky Lashenko. Cardo Chav for $4.99. Thank you so much, Cardo Chav. They say ever try ground coffee and salt dry rub on your your fried liver? It tastes good. Do you think eating fried coffee grounds is safe? I don't know the answer to this one.
I've never tried that. I've maybe seen it on beef or a roast. Yeah, maybe. I don't think it'd be a bad thing.
I thought maybe the beans were like estrogenic if you ate them
maybe
directly.
They're too fibrous, too rough and irritating.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, but yeah, I do know that, like, watching those like Tennessee barbecue cook-offs, I know they do put coffee grounds on like the thing, or maybe that's not the state they do that. Who knows?
Right.
Thank you, Cardo Chef. Sorry we couldn't be more helpful. Edward Cornish, they say, for $5, thank you so much, Edward. They say, have you guys looked into Wilhelm Reich's therapies? Danny, I think I remember you mentioning character armor in a video. Have you interested in Wilhelm Reich at all?
No, don't know him.
I don't know much about him, to be honest. Like, I just know bits and pieces. I don't even think I could summarize like his philosophy. He was just like, in the last video I made, he just has some good quotes about authority. And also I know the FDA killed him, so they like put him in jail because they thought he was a quack, and then he died in jail. So it's like kind of a cautionary tale about kind of authoritarian medicine of what happened to him specifically. But I like he had an orgone theory of cancer and his orgone machine, but I don't know much about it, to be honest. But that's a great question. Thank you, Edward. Colin Rico for another for $5. He says, "What advice, Emma, do you have for a young man for a young woman new to bioenergetic point of view, looking to improve her diet and lifestyle, asking to help my wife?"
What advice on her eating, or just where to start?
What advice, Emma, do you have for a young woman new to the bioenergetic point of view, looking to improve her diet and lifestyle, asking for my wife? So I guess just a starting point.
Yeah, I think first things first, get her just become aware of her, you know, the energy that she's creating, and if she can tick certain boxes in regards to symptoms, if her temperatures are consistently below 36.6 Celsius, pulses on the slow side or raging, just those probably things to have someone become aware of. Okay, that is a bit off. All right. Then they often are interested in knowing, what does that mean? So yeah, I mean, this is where when someone begins with me, I have them fill out a questionnaire that ticks those kind of boxes, because ultimately people should be asymptomatic most of the time. And it's when people start to become aware of, well, I suffer from this and I've always had that, and that kind of annoys me, and yeah, that's been an ongoing thing for me. When you start to make them aware of the fact that you shouldn't be experiencing any of these uncomfortable symptoms. Like, being human, being a female shouldn't be a given that you should have to put up with this or medicate that. So if there's anything that's chronically, annoying her, just to perhaps raise the bar and go, well, I want to aspire to not experiencing these symptoms and feeling good all the time. What can I do? So then to then question what you've been doing up to this point, and perhaps that's not working for you. What are the things we could shift? But I think it all comes down to being educated about the whys and hows behind it all, because you can never just be told you should eat this and you should go away and try this and here's a Ray Peat diet, whatever that means. But to be educated on how things work and why those symptoms are presenting. We'll probably have the conversations around that as to going, well, what are you struggling with? And do you realize that that's not a normal thing? And I think for women particularly, when it comes to their cycle and PMS particularly, I hear it time and time again. They might have gone back and forward to their GP and they're saying that every month, the week leading up to my period and I'm feeling so horrible and I get the migraines, I get the mood swings, and they pretty much say, well, that's just part and parcel of being female and suck it up and take the naprogesic and can't help you there. Whereas that's just shocking, I think. To think that it should be a given that you're a female, therefore every month for 50 years or so, you've got to just expect to be feeling ill. It's so common now that it's seen to be normal and therefore it's okay and you've just got to make the best of it. But it shouldn't have to be that way at all.
Yeah, you're right. It's like it's almost just accepted that you're going to have tons of symptoms. Yeah, I love that. So gathering information, again, because you can't know where you are going if you don't know where you are. And so gathering the pulse and temperature, or maybe putting your nutrition into Chronometer, looking at the calcium, looking at the protein, and having a starting place. And so it doesn't have to be outside. It can just be collecting information about yourself, which is...
Collect information, maybe observe how frequently you urinate, how frequently you have bowel motions, what time do you get to sleep? Do you, sleep through the night without waking? Do you wake feeling pretty good? How's your appetite in the morning? Yeah, all those questions. And if anything outside of the ideal, looking at all the ways we can address those and it might just be simple things initially. For a lot of women, I see it's often just you just need to eat more, full stop. That can make a huge difference. Everyone seems to be under eating.
I love it. Thank you so much, Colin. Harry Burgos for $10. Thank you so much, Harry. He says, Danny, for those that can't tolerate the taste of liver, Chris Masterjohn suggested that they try Liverwurst. He used U.S. wellness meat, i.e. a combo of grass-fed cow liver, beef heart, and kidney. I've never tried it before. Have you ever tried Liverwurst?
Liverwurst, no. And I've looked for it here and you can't get it without a lot of preservatives. So this usually comes from Germany or it's not readily made here. But this is exactly why Kitty and I started making up freeze-dried liver capsules. It's something I never thought I'd do because I've heard myself for years telling people fresh is best. You've got to buy it fresh. You've got to eat it the day you get it. It's got to be slaughtered that day. And then, you start to realize, well, it's doable. But over and over we'd hear people saying, I just can't tolerate it, or it's just so foreign to my palate, or I've tried it cooking different ways, or I overcook it and then it's kind of grey. Is that good? And then the leftovers go bad. Is it oxidized? And so she was sort of at me too saying, well, we should try and do some really high quality freeze-dried liver capsules, which in the end I said, well, I'm going to have a strict criteria on them, but they have to be Australian, they have to be freeze-dried, they have to be non-defatted, no other ingredients. And so we've managed to make some up and we're getting some really good testimonials on them. And for myself, it's been interesting because I was always adamant, no, I'll just stick with eating the liver. But last few months with, everything going a bit crazy and not being able to access certain things, I've been doing those instead of eating the liver, and I'm finding as much benefit and super handy. So I think, you look at even with Ray, he would advocate potentially natural desiccated thyroid perhaps. And these are, organs and glands which have been dried and they're perhaps not as perfect as, the real thing, but there's still potentially some benefit to gain, definitely better than nothing. But if you could get liverwurst without those preservatives, it would be amazing, I would say. But I haven't been able to get it, not in Australia.
Yeah, I think Georgie was the first one to... I've never tried it either, but I bet U.S. wellness meats is they're pretty hippie, and so I doubt there's many preservatives in it already.
Yeah. Oh, if it's, yeah, that would be certainly worthwhile. You might want to caution if already you've got fairly high iron load, with some of those organs, and overdoing it, and just, maybe have it in small amounts.
I asked Ray once, and I was like, how much coffee do you drink when you eat liver or oysters? And he said at least a cup, he said.
Yep.
Okay, that's really it. I'm kind of perusing the chat to see if there's anything else, but I think we should call it because I've kept you on here long enough. Emma, that was so much fun, and so I sincerely appreciate it. Where I have your website here, I have Saturday here, I have your Instagram, your Facebook. Is there anything else I'm forgetting?
You can always email me, emma@thenutritioncoach.com.au. That's all on my website too. But yeah, just drop me a question if there's anything else that comes of this. But
I'm so glad the Emma curse.
Audio worked, everything worked.
I know. I'm really shocked, especially since I'm basically on a new system here. So again, thank you so much, Emma. Thank you so much, everybody in the chat. Thank you for the super chats. You guys are amazing. I am very fortunate to have the audience that I have. And again, so much thanks to Emma for joining me multiple times, and mostly me screwing up each time, and even coming back to do this. And so, sincere appreciation.
Oh, no, I always love chatting. You've been my saving grace over the years too, I think. Because when we were these kind of lone voices out there at the beginning, it was so nice to find someone else like, oh, you're a crazy person like me. You're advocating everything that everyone is doing the opposite. And you would question what you were doing at times, because you weren't going with the narrative at all. So yeah, finding you and becoming friends has been a godsend, and nice to be able to download sometimes and speak the same language.
Feel the same. Again, thank you so much. And I know you're very busy, so again, I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you, chat. Everybody have a great weekend. Please give this episode a like if you enjoyed it, and I'll definitely have Emma back if she has the time, and because again, she has children and a family, and so I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you guys so much. Emma, stay on the line, and you guys have a great weekend. I will see you not next week, but the week after, the 24th or 25th, I forget what day it was, for Mr. Ray Peat and Georgie Dinkov. Thank you guys. Take care. See you very soon.